Hello, everybody, and welcome into CamelBacked Media. Today is Wednesday, August 12th, and Cole and I are going to be giving you our official division standings predictions, how we see all 8 divisions shaking out. We're going to be giving you some analysis, teams 1 through 4, and there's definitely going to be some debates in there as our standings are looking a little bit different, but that's to be expected when there's just so many good teams, it feels like, in the National Football League this season.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot. There's going to be a lot of parity heading in this season, but we're going to start out at the AFC East. And Garrett, I'll let you take it away from here. Give me your quick rankings.
Yeah, so I think this was one of the easiest divisions to rank, and I think we can kind of both agree on that. We both have the Bills finishing in first. I guess I'll go first. I have the Bills in first, Patriots in second, and then the Jets in third, and the Dolphins in fourth. For me, those bottom two are kind of unnecessary as to how you want to rank them. I think those are two of the bottom feeders of this league. They're both in kind of the rebuilding stage. The Jets may be a little farther along, where the Dolphins kind of just tore it down this past offseason. But those are going to be two of the worst teams in the NFL. I don't really think it matters how you order them. However, I think Geno Smith is going to steal the Jets a couple more wins than Malik Willis is for the Dolphins. And I like the coaching staff of New York better, so I'm putting them ahead. And then when it comes to the Bills and the Patriots, it was the Patriots division for so long, and then it kind of swung over once Josh Allen came to the league, and the Bills won it for so many years. And then the Patriots kind of took it back last year. So it's going to be this interesting battle to see who's going to win the AFC East. And I think the Patriots are going to take a step back. The schedule is a lot harder. I know we were clowning the Patriots for how easy their schedule was last year. I don't think that has a ton to do with their success, but naturally having a schedule that's just this much harder, you're going to drop a few more games, even if they're close. Like, not every bounce is going to go your way, which I feel like it did last year. So I think they just lose a couple more. And, the Bills, feels like we're saying the same thing with them every year. How far can Josh Allen carry them? I do think they're going to get back on top of the division. And I think the head-to-head matchups are going to go in their way, which ultimately is what this division might come down to. But I really do think that the Patriots are due for a step back. And I think you agree with me as well.
Yeah, this division will be pretty quick to gloss over, as we both have the Bills and the Patriots at 1 and 2. And then Dolphins and Jets, like you said, I don't think there's much time needed to be spent on them. I think those are two of the top or bottom 3 teams in the entire National Football League, so I don't think we should spend much time. It will be interesting. We get Malik Willis another chance. I mean, I don't believe in him very much. I know he likes to put mayo in coffee, but other than that, I don't see any bright spots when it comes to him. And then the Bills, I mean, you said it. It's about Josh Allen, but at the end of the day, this is not a bad football team. Their offense ranked 3rd overall last season, and yes, that's highly because of Josh Allen. However, their rush offensive line was number 1. They had 159.6 yards per game rushing the ball, which is absolutely massive for Josh Allen. Take some of the weight off of his shoulders. And the defense was top 10 in the league. So it's not like their defense is any slouch at all. And Patriots, you said it best. They had the single easiest schedule since the 1999 season when I believe the Rams had it. This year they have the 6th hardest schedule in the NFL. So I think we're just going to see a natural dip in the win column for the New England Patriots. But other than that, I think we see it the same way. So I think it's about time to move on to the NFC East, where we have a little disparities here.
Yeah, just one more quick thing to point out. This is the first time in Josh Allen's career playing with an offensive-minded head coach after the departure of Sean McDermott. So I think that's something kind of interesting to see is, how does he kind of transform this offense? And it's an offense that, I mean, you look at the running back in James Cook, who led the league in yards last year. So, yeah, Josh Allen is the motor that makes this Bills team go, but they now have one of the best rushing attacks in the last few years, and now an offensive-minded head coach in Joe Brady. So certainly something to keep an eye on. Staying out east, but now going to the NFC. And this has been, the division that for so many years. Last year, we finally had a repeat winner in the Eagles, but I think it was like 25 straight seasons or something insane where a new team was winning it every single year. Finally, the Eagles broke that curse, if you want to call it a curse. I mean, it's just more parity for the league. But starting off winning the division, I have the Dallas Cowboys winning the division. I have the Philadelphia Eagles coming in second, and then I have the Giants in third and the Commanders in fourth.
Yeah, so we have a little disagreement here. I have the Eagles coming in first, Dallas in second, and then Giants and Commanders following suit. I just don't see how this Cowboys team, and I'm a Cowboys guy, you know that. Dak's my favorite player in the entire NFL. However, I just don't see how they can come from a 7-9-1 team to surpassing this Eagles team that has only looked amazing with Jalen Hurts leading that offense. I mean, obviously, that offense last year was not a bright spot for them. I believe they had 3 halves of football where they didn't score a single point or have a single passing yard, which is just abysmal. However, with all of that, they still went 11-6 and led the division and were number 1. So I just don't see, with such a terrible offensive season last year from Jalen Hurts and from that Eagles team, how they can drop any more games than they already did last year.
Yeah, I just look at the Cowboys, and I think this is one of, if not the best offenses in the NFL. And I just think that they're finally able to cobble some pieces together on defense. We saw them sign Quinnen Williams to a 3-year deal. I mean, Caleb Downs might have been the steal of the draft. It wasn't really a steal. He kind of just fell into their pocket. And, I mean, they were happy taking him. So I think this defense is going to look a little bit better. And I think that's really all it's going to take to propel them to the top of the division with how explosive their offense is. Is this going to translate to playoff success? Maybe not necessarily, but the Eagles are a team to me where the highs are so high, but the lows get pretty low as well. I feel like there's a lot of variation with them where Jalen Hurts will throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns one game, and then he'll attempt 10 passes the next game. And I feel like there's a lot of emotional roll. It's an emotional roller coaster following this Eagles team sometimes, and it's headlined by Coach Nick Sirianni, who might be on the hot seat for a coach who's led them to 2 Super Bowls and has a Super Bowl ring, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I just like the Cowboys' overall roster better, and I'm interested to see what the Eagles' pass game looks like without their number 1 receiver, A.J. Brown now. How does Devontae Smith step into that role? I really like the draft pick in Mekhi Lemon. I think he's going to be a valid wide receiver 2 for them, but this is really going to test Hurts for the people who still don't believe in him, having maybe not necessarily a true number 1. So I think, you're splitting hairs a little bit between those 2 teams. I think we can agree that those are the 2 best teams in the division. And you look at the bottom 2 teams, and this is a Commanders team who we both picked to finish last, who just 2 years ago was in the NFC Championship game, and who looked like they had one of the brightest futures in the NFL, headlined by Jaden Daniels. And everybody was like, man, the Bears messed up. They should have taken Jaden Daniels instead of Caleb Williams. And then you look at last year and it's like, whoa, Jaden Daniels wasn't able to stay on the field. Caleb Williams had that amazing breakout sophomore season. Laramie Tunsil going down does worry me on the offensive line for the Commanders. And I just think this is a team where I'm not going to say that Jaden Daniels is an RG3 where he's just going to have this rookie breakout season and then kind of just rot for a few years and be out of the league. But I wouldn't be shocked either if Jaden Daniels' best football is behind him in that rookie season and he's not able to replicate that just because it's going to be a really tough division. In the Giants, I just think head coaching is so important in this league, and I think Harbaugh is going to be able to steal them a few more wins. And this is an up-and-coming roster that I'm excited about, and I think he's going to be really good in a few years.
Yeah, so if you listen to anything about the football, the Giants are one of those teams that almost everyone seems to be high on compared to their last year. And I do think they'll do better than a 4-13 record in which they finished with last year. However, I don't think that speaks too much volume because it's not easy to do much worse than that. When going over to the Commanders, this is a team led by Dan Quinn, who I am a huge fan of, and I love me some Dan Quinn. I mean, I think what he did with that Cowboys defense a few years ago was unbelievable because we've seen every other year besides that one year that Dan Quinn led that defense, they've just been horrific, and I don't see that changing. Touching back on the Cowboys, you're talking about the offense. Yeah, they were number 1 in the league last year, and I think they are amazing. I mean, Dak Prescott nicknamed them Gotti, which I don't know if I love giving yourself a nickname, but he did it. But their defense ranked 30th, and if they want to make a real playoff push, I don't think they have to move up to the 25th spot. I think they have to get up to the teens, which I just don't know if this Cowboys defense can do. I mean, we've seen this same exact story for the past 5 years. This is a song that's never been stopped singing, where the Cowboys offense is a top 5 team or offense in the league outside of when Dak has had those season-ending injuries, and the defense just has not been able to hold their weight, and I don't see that changing, unfortunately. And for the Commanders, I mean, you said it best. Everyone was super high on Jaden Daniels. I never got super high on him. I'm one of those guys where it's a show-to-me type of guy, so when you only do it for 1 year, it really doesn't prove too much to me. Just like I felt the same exact way when C.J. Stroud had one of the best rookie seasons ever, and everyone was talking about him being one of the best QBs in the league for years to come. I never really understood it. Sure, it's better to say that now after he took a dip. We'll see if he steps up. But like I said, Jaden Daniels, he's going to have to continue to show me that he can do it before I kind of crown him as that top 10 QB, which they had him after his rookie season.
Yeah, and maybe it's not just the lack of belief in Jaden Daniels, who I think is going to have a solid season, but I just don't trust this Commanders defense either. And they have a very tough schedule. Their first 3 games of the season are just a gauntlet with what they have to open up with. So, I mean, I just I think it's going to be some close losses for the Commanders, and they're going to look back, and they're going to be one of the best fourth place teams in the NFL. But at the end of the day, you're still going to be not making the playoffs and at the bottom of your division. So with that, we can move on to the AFC North division, where my favorite team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, lands in. However, they are not at my 1 or 2 spot. I have the Baltimore Ravens winning the division with the Bengals on their heels in second. I do have the Steelers finishing in third, and then the Browns rounding it out in fourth place.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a disagreement once again here. I actually have the Bengals in first, Ravens in second. I have your Steelers coming into third, and then, of course, the Browns in fourth. And I think what's going on over there in Cleveland gives us a little bit of something interesting to watch with that QB battle, but it's one of the worst QB battles we've seen in a long time. I mean, Minnesota had one of their own. However, I think that QB battle with Kyler Murray just and far surpasses the one that's going on in Cleveland. So I don't think we have to talk about them much because this is a pretty good division outside of the Cleveland Browns, who I think we can just omit them from these standings. And for the Bengals, I mean, Zach Taylor, we've been talking about some head coaches that are on the hot seat. That seat may be the hottest out of any of them. They went 6-11 last year. Obviously, Joe Burrow missed a lot of time. However, they're coming into the season with the third easiest schedule in the entire NFL. Their opponents are combining with a 45% win percentage in the 2025 season. And I think that may be what propels this team to the first place in this division. Yes, their defense was terrible last year. They were 31st in the entire league. However, when you're playing such poor competition, I think that can give you some of the confidence that you need. And with Joe Burrow healthy, this team can do whatever they want. I mean, we saw they went to a Super Bowl with such a horrible defense, just like Patrick Mahomes was able to do early in his career with a terrible Chiefs defense. So some of these QBs, they just have the ability to catapult these terrible defenses into the playoffs. And I think Joe Burrow's one of them. I mean, if you look at Joe Burrow in completion percentage throughout the NFL history, he ranks number 1, which is kind of crazy to think about. But out of every single quarterback that's ever came through this league, he's number 1. So I believe in Joe Burrow, as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, I think he can do enough to catapult them to the playoffs. I don't think he can do enough to catapult them to the top of the division. You mentioned Zach Taylor. That's a coach who's kind of had the injury bug as a pass for why he still has a job, if we're being honest. Burrow not being healthy has kind of taken the blame off him, and it's been easy to point to that. But even when Burrow's been healthy the last couple of seasons, the Bengals aren't just destroying teams and winning every game because of their defense and how bad it's been, and now losing Trey Hendrickson. I mean, it's really a defense that just has to cobble together a few stops a game. We're not asking them to hold their opponents in the single digits and get 3 or 4 turnovers. They just have to do enough to give that offense a chance to shine. And I think they'll do enough in the regular season. But you look at the Ravens, you look at this is a prove-it season to me for Lamar Jackson, who I know he's had really good Ravens teams throughout the years, and I know Harbaugh's a good coach, but Harbaugh's a defensive coach. So getting somebody else in there, and this is the best Ravens team and coaching staff I believe that he's had since his time in Baltimore began. And there's a lot of pressure to me on the Baltimore Ravens to make it out of the AFC this year. I think expectations are sky high for them, and they should be because of all the talent they have. They just signed Zay Flowers to the extension. Lamar Jackson is probably in the waning years of his prime. I think we can agree on that. And it feels like it's now or never in Baltimore for a team who, yeah, this has been a great little dynasty, if you will, in terms of making the playoffs, but they haven't even made an AFC championship game with Lamar. And the pressure is really on him, and I just like their defense so much more than I do in Cincinnati that I think they win the division. But, yeah, the Bengals in second, and this is, you look at the 3 and 4 spots, I agree with you. I don't think the Browns have much. They are becoming a very interesting team to me to watch. If they get a pretty high pick in the draft and get somebody like Arch Manning or an exciting young quarterback, I think this could be a candidate to turn it around in the 2027 season. I really like what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. They're starting to put weapons on the outside and continue to build that offensive line. But I just think the quarterback situation is such a disaster and so much worse than the rest of the teams in the division that they're a clear number 4. And then for my Steelers, I love the draft of Jeremy Bernard, getting that wide receiver 3, and then going and getting Michael Pittman in the offseason to pair with DK Metcalf. I think we have one of the more underrated wide receiver cores, but you can only win so many games when your quarterback is a rock and can't move in the pocket. I think him and McCarthy are going to be fun to watch them reunite, because I think Tomlin had kind of simplified the offense a little too much where there was just a lack of creativity. But listen, we saw it against the Texans in the playoffs last year. Rodgers can't move, and so it's just hard to win with a quarterback who's that immobile.
Yeah, definitely. This Steelers team is honestly fascinating because of the way that they're building themselves. They've had 3 head coaches in the last 30 years, and they go out and get a guy like Mike McCarthy, who I just don't think anyone in that Steelers organization truly believes he's there for the long run. And everyone knows it's Aaron Rodgers' last season. And to stack onto that, they're getting all of these veteran-type guys to where it almost looks like they're trying to make a run, and they truly do believe that they can. Am I buying it? No, I'm not. However, the way that they're building themselves has been extremely interesting to me, because they don't look like they're a team looking towards the future. They're looking right now, and I don't think right now is staring them back in the face. So that's just a tough team to watch, and I'm sorry that you have to deal with that. And I'm sorry you have to deal with Aaron Rodgers just holding your team handcuffed. And then with the Ravens, I'd have to disagree. I do think Lamar Jackson has had better teams in his career. I mean, the 2020 Baltimore Ravens, they were number 1 in the entire league for defensive rankings, and I think that defense was just absolutely stacked. I do love the addition of Trey Hendrickson, which also simultaneously hurts my positioning on the Bengals because that's such a key player that they lost. However, I just don't know if it's going to be enough to make up for that weak schedule that the Bengals are facing and a fully healthy Joe Burrow coming in this season.
Yeah, you mentioned the Steelers, and they're trying to be all in. Kind of reminds me of another one of my favorite teams, the Golden State Warriors. Just the Unk Fest, the Unk Fest that we have going on that's going to lead to a slightly above average season and no playoff success. But we'll bounce it back over to the NFC, and this is one of the divisions we had circled before we even came on air. The NFC North, it's loaded, and I could honestly see any of these 4 teams finishing in any spot in the division. For me, I decided to rank it Chicago Bears winning the division. I have the Lions in second, Green Bay finishing in third, and then the Vikings, who just named Kyler Murray the starter yesterday, rounding it out in last.
Yeah, there's such a big, I guess, differentiator between our 2 divisions here, because I have your Chicago Bears coming in last, which, just as you said, it would not surprise me if we come back to this thing in 8 months and the Chicago Bears finished first in this division. That's how stacked this division is. It also wouldn't surprise me if the Packers, who I have leading off in first place in this division, would come in last, especially if Micah Parsons goes down with another injury. However, looking at the Packers, who I do have coming in first, they finished last year with a 9-3 before Parsons went down, and then they lost four straight with a tie. And I think if Parsons can stay healthy, he was on a Defensive Player of the Year candidate run last year, and I think he's going to stack those on top of each other because that's just what he does. Detroit Lions, like I said, I love Ben Johnson, and you could really see that the absence of Ben Johnson hurt that team because they kind of looked a loss in their offense. However, I think another year without Ben Johnson, I guess kind of learning that playbook is going to put them in that right spot. And then the Vikings, this team is just unbelievable everywhere outside of their quarterback position. They're a top 3 defense in the league. And then offensively, they have a good enough O-line with some of the best receivers that you can stack on each other in the entire NFL. So as long as they can just get mediocre play from a guy like Kyler Murray, who I mentioned that completion percentage earlier, is somehow 5th in all-time completion percentage in the NFL, has made multiple Pro Bowls and led that Cardinals team to a playoff. If you can just get mediocre play from that man right there, they're going to win a lot of football games. And then the Bears, it's hard to talk bad about them because they're such a good football team, but in such a stacked division, I do have them coming in last.
Yeah, I think for me, this division kind of comes down to quarterback play, and I think that's why I have the Bears winning it because Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in this division. I think we can both agree on that. I don't.
I wouldn't
You,
give it to him quite yet.
you're
Maybe
taking
it's because
Jordan
I'm
Love?
high. Yeah, I'm taking Jordan Love.
That's blasphemy. But Caleb Williams being the best quarterback in this division, obviously they're going to have the tougher schedule. Winning the division last year, they're going to have to play the first place teams from the NFC. And you already said it. If they finish second, third, or fourth, I wouldn't be blown out of my mind like I would for a team like the Bills or the Patriots if they finished in last in their division. But I just think another year of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams is only going to help. I think it's just going to continue to improve their chemistry. And listen, I'm not making the comparisons yet, but Caleb Williams was able to pull the Bears out of some spots like Mahomes was able to pull the Chiefs out of some spots. You watch some of the plays he makes down the stretch of games, and it's like, man, it doesn't even matter who's out there. He's just willing them to wins. And that is why I think they're going to repeat as division champions. Then you look at it for me, the next two spots, Jared Goff and Jordan Love. I'd probably give the slight edge to Jordan Love on in terms of who I think the better quarterback is, but I just love the Lions playmakers so much more than I do the Packers. I mean, you look at Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We already did a TikTok, and I ranked them as the best receiver and running back core in the NFL. So for me, it's just I love Dan Campbell. I love everything that the Lions do, and I think they're going to have a little bit of a bounce back year. Where last year they were down, and you said it with the Packers. When Micah Parsons is healthy and firing on all cylinders, there's no reason this team can't win the division. There's no reason this team can't be a Super Bowl contender. I need to see more superstar play, if you will, out of Jordan Love. I feel like he's a little bit too much of a clock manager, a game manager, and I think that works and it leads them to wins. It leads them to the playoffs, but they haven't made it past the 6 or 7 seed, and I think to win the division, we're going to need to see more from him. And like you said with the Vikings, this is a really good roster, and we saw what Kirk Cousins made out of Justin Jefferson. So as long as they don't have a hole back there, I think Justin Jefferson is due for a bounce back. And I'm a little higher on Kyler Murray than I think the average NFL fan is.
Oh my.
I didn't feel like this was a legit NFL starting job battle. I was never high on McCarthy. I thought the reason Michigan won that national title was because of everyone except for him. And, Kyler Murray, they didn't really ever give him much to win with or to work with in Arizona. And he's going to have an offensive-minded, quarterback-whispering coach in Kevin McConnell, and who I think is the best receiver in the NFL as his wide receiver one.
Yeah, no, a lot of good points you make there. Going back onto those Bears, because that's where the biggest differentiator comes between us, with you having them finish first and I have them finishing in last. The Bears last season finished 27th in total defensive ranking last year, and at the same time finished first place in, turnovers created. They had 23 interceptions, 23 interceptions, and I just think regression to the mean will happen to them, where I just can't see them causing all of those turnovers game after game like they were able to last season, to where suddenly this 27th ranked defensive team becomes dead last, and dead last by a good mile, to where this offense just may not be able to hold up enough to win them all those games, where Caleb Williams, like you said, was able to turn into Superman, pull a rabbit out of a hat, just like we've seen Patrick Mahomes do. So that's why I'm not as high on the Bears. However, once again, so much parity in this division, I would not be shocked if they're first or second.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think, the most exciting division to follow for sure. Another intriguing division that a couple years ago was really bad and really unexciting that has kind of turned into a rather intriguing division to follow is the AFC South, on which I have the Jaguars repeating at champs. I have the Texans in second, the Colts finishing in third, and the Titans, who still think are a few years away, rounding out the division.
Yeah, so we don't have a single disagreement here. We have all of the exact same rankings, and I think that speaks volumes because we have not agreed very much on this show tonight. But for the Jaguars, yeah, they're 11th in offense, 11th in defense, so they are the exact same. And then Liam Cohen, as cringy as he is when he speaks to the public, I do think he's a super great head coach. And Trevor Lawrence took a leap late in that 2025 season, and I think that's huge for him. I think there's a big difference from taking a leap early in the 2025 season and dipping off late in the season to where he took the leap, which was late in the season, which I think is great for momentum coming into the 2026 season. And then this Texans team, Of course, we all know about how great their defense is. They only allowed 298 yards per game last season. D'Amico Ryan, one of my favorite coaches in the entire league. The passion that he coaches with is similar to that of a Dan Campbell, and I just can't speak enough about how much I love D'Amico Ryan. However, CJ Stroud looked horrendous last season. I mean, he's the reason they didn't make it farther. A lot of people going into the playoffs picked them actually to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, and that was because if the Houston Texans just got okay quarterback play, they were going to be your representatives for the AFC in the Super Bowl. However, CJ Stroud gave him much less than that, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to pick it up. We do see Tank Dell returning, and I've seen some clips from him, and he looks unbelievable, which is pretty surprising from such a gruesome injury. And we do know that that's CJ Stroud's guy all the way from the college days. So maybe it was a bit of an emotional thing. You saw him crying when Tank Dell went down last season. So maybe that'll kind of inspire him to play better, but we'll have to see on that one. And then Colts and Titans rounding it out. Colts are a much better team than the Titans, so I don't think there's any, chance of the Titans surpass the Colts in that third spot. However, Daniel Jones coming in off a terrible injury, and I'm not going to lie, I wasn't super high on Daniel Jones last season when he was playing some of the best football he's ever played. I thought that it was kind of an anomaly, so we'll see if he can pick it back up. I definitely want him to because I love the guy, but I don't know if he can.
Yeah, starting from the bottom and I'll work my way up. Really, for me, it's just the Titans. What does Cam Ward look like? I don't really care about the rest of their team yet. I just want to see signs of him improving and getting better and having command of that offense and, being able to make some of those plays that the superstar quarterbacks, the former number one overall picks, have made throughout the history of this league. I agree with you with Daniel Jones. I was kind of riding the high of him last year. It was fun. It was an awesome story. But now that you have, almost a full season of him on tape, you have him and Shane Steichen, maybe some of the magic starts to wear off where teams realize, how they're going to attack them. And losing Michael Pittman is definitely going to hurt as well. They decided to pay Jonathan Taylor, so that's money that isn't going elsewhere to, the defense or to protecting Daniel Jones. And I don't think he's going to have a fall off of a season, but I think we're going to realize that Daniel Jones is just an average quarterback in this league, that he really isn't what he was playing like in the first 10 games of last year. And even those last couple games before he got hurt, when the Colts had played some better teams, those had resulted in losses. And then you mentioned how disappointing CJ Stroud was, especially towards the end of last year. It's a really interesting case for me because we're ripping on a guy who, in his first 3 years in the league, has 3 playoff wins. And he's paired with a young head coach. And in their first 3 years together, they won a playoff game in each season. And so you look at that, and if you're a Texans fan, when you drafted CJ Stroud, you're probably like, man, that's a major success. But then you watch this team and how good the defense is, and you're like, we can't waste another year of this defense. This defense is only going to be together for so long. They're only going to be in their prime for so long. Guys like Derek Stingley Jr., guys like Will Anderson, they might not be around in Houston forever. So as long as you have them, you need to be perennial AFC contenders every year. And I don't know if CJ Stroud can take him to that level. However, I do think he's heard the noise all offseason, and I don't think he's as bad as he played last year. I think he's going to have a bounce back year, and I think getting Tank Dell back is definitely going to help with that. But can they go toe-to-toe with teams like the Bills and teams like the Jaguars and teams like, the Chiefs and the Broncos and the Chargers who have these better offenses in the playoffs? I don't know. And for the Jaguars, they seem to figure something out at the end of last year. I mean, you look at that playoff game, they were going toe-to-toe with the Bills. They were not outclassed really in any of their games towards the second half of last year. So it's an exciting team, and I do think that they could be a sneaky team to make it out of the AFC.
Wow, that's a bold one there. I mean, I love it. I love this Jags team. They kind of had the turnovers that the Bears had, however, with an actual great defense. So they didn't just singly rely on those turnovers. So I'm high on the Jaguars as well. I'm not sure if I would be picking them to come out of the AFC next season or if I have them as one of my dark horses, but I definitely don't hate it coming from you.
Yeah, I'm not picking them, but I do think that it could be an interesting team to follow. And we'll transition to kind of the clunker of the NFL that is the NFC South, a division that's slowly on the rise and slowly getting better. This might have been the hardest division for me to rank just because I don't really know what to think about a lot of these teams. I mean, you look at the Panthers, and they were, one drive away from taking down the Rams last year in the playoffs. But does anybody think the Panthers are really that good or that they're going to win the division again? And look at the Falcons. You said it with the Vikings. I think the Falcons have one of the best rosters in the NFL. They just have such a big question at quarterback that I don't know what to do with them. But I picked the rest of their roster, and I'm betting on guys like Bijan and Drake London to be able to carry them enough to win this division. In second place, I had the Buccaneers. It just feels like they don't really have a plan as to, they feel like the Steelers a little bit to me, where they're like, we have a quarterback that's good enough. We have a team that's good enough, but good enough is the 6 or the 7 seed and a wild card first round exit. And then, like I said, the Panthers, I just feel like they're due for a regression. That was a team that I didn't think was all that good last year, whose record didn't really match up with the talent on their team. And then rounding it out for me is the Saints. We saw Tyler Shuck at the end of last year kind of put it together. I'm not buying him yet. I'm going to need to see a lot more, and I don't think they have enough around him to put them anywhere else except for the bottom of this division.
Yeah, again, as boring as this division is, it's going to be fun to watch boring because of all the questions we have about every single team. I feel like a lot of times when you talk about the good teams, you have a lot of answers and a couple questions. And for these 4 teams, I feel like we don't have any of the answers and all of the questions, which is what makes this division interesting to watch if you're looking at it purely from a who's going to make the playoffs aspect. Because obviously we know no matter how bad this division will be, one of these teams will make the playoffs. And we saw that last year with the Panthers going under 500 and still making the playoffs. However, you have the Falcons coming in first. I actually have them coming in dead last in this division. I think the quarterback play is as bad as it can get. I think maybe the Browns are the only team that are worse than them in that quarterback spot. I think both Tua and Michael Penix, while being young, are 2 wet matches in a dark cave. I don't think they're going to give anything to this team. And the Buccaneers, as crazy as they are to watch, especially a guy like Baker Mayfield, if history tells us anything, Baker Mayfield plays his best football with a chip on his shoulder. And there is a massive chip riding on that dude's shoulder. I mean, Buccaneers simply told him, hey, we don't want to give you the money that you think you're worth and that you probably are worth if you look at the numbers and where all the other quarterbacks.
All right, go ahead.
All right. And if history tells us anything, it's that Baker Mayfield plays the best when he has a chip on his shoulder, and the chip is about as big as it can get this season, with the Buccaneers front office pretty much telling him that he's not worth the money that the entire league would tell him he's worth. And Baker's okay with that. One thing about him is he's an incredible leader. So what he did, which I highly respect, is he said, hey, all of this contract talk, we're finishing this once camp is over and once we get into the season, which I know all the players are riding with him on, because that's a really amazing thing for a quarterback to do, which usually in the NFL, they're all focused about their money. However, the Buccaneers is an interesting position because they really do have a stronghold on this argument because they have all the power. Next year, if Baker plays an incredible season this year and he's worth all that money, they can just franchise tag him and he's going to have to play for less money than he was actually offered this season. So I'm not sure where Baker's planning on going from here, but I do think he deserves the money because he is the type of guy that will leave it all on the line for the team. And then getting to your team that's coming in first, the Atlanta Falcons, I think the fact that Tua is still playing quarterback is a bit sinful. I mean, that man isn't going to know any of his kids' names. And I say that in a joking manner only to make light of something that I truly do think is just really sad and terrible to see happen. We've seen what's happened to Antonio Brown. I mean, that man's entire life has gone downhill. He went from potentially a top 10 receiver of all time. You could go even higher to now someone that's only seen in the limelight of his criminal activities. And I'm not saying Tua is going to do anything like that, but you do want him to have a life outside of football. And with some of the scary injuries that he's had, I don't think he should be stepping onto a football field. I think he should be taking his money. And I know it's almost impossible for those guys to put the game away because of everything they've given it to him and everything that the game's meant to him. But I really do think if he wants something outside of football, he should quit the game. However, now getting onto skill, I don't think Tua is a great quarterback. He's extremely undersized. He can't really see over the offensive line. And unlike a Kyler Murray, who's in that same type of position, he can't move like Kyler can. So there's really nothing that allows him to escape. And I think his brain is just so fogged at this point that he also doesn't have the IQ level of playing a quarterback position. And then the New Orleans Saints, I'm personally a fan of this team just because Tyler Shutt is such a fun player to watch. And then Kellen Moore, one of, if not my favorite head coaches in the entire league. Not my favorite because I love me some Dan Campbell, but I love Kellen Moore. What he did with that Cowboys offense was just incredible to watch. And then to see him replicate the exact same thing with the Eagles offense and then win a championship with them in a Super Bowl in a dominating fashion, I think it was only right that he finally got his head coaching job, and I'm happy he did so. But I don't think they're too high. I know they kind of ended the season on a strong run, but I don't see them really continuing it. So they're in my third spot.
Yeah, I just look at this Buccaneers team, and they were a team that was 6-2 last year, going to the hard part of their schedule, and they came out of it 7-9. And I think that's just kind of been the story for me with the Buccaneers, is that this is just a good team who is able to beat teams that they're better than, but when they go up against teams who are better than them, and you look at the part of their schedule last year where they had to play the Rams and they lost. They had to play the Bills, they lost. They had to play the Patriots and they lost. So teams that, even the Panthers who end up winning the division, they lost during that stretch. I just feel like it's a team who Baker Mayfield is a good enough quarterback in this league where they're going to beat, and maybe that propels them in this division because it's essentially three of the worst teams in the NFL that they're going to be competing against in some ways. But I just don't think they quite have what it takes to beat the teams that are better than them, and that is why I think they take a little bit of a step back, although they didn't win the division last year either. So this could potentially be a wild card team just because wins are going to be are going to be had in this division. All these teams can't go, 5-12, so somebody's going to have to win it, and somebody's going to have to rack up some wins. But we'll move over to the last two divisions, two that are a lot more exciting to talk about, and the AFC West to me was a really hard division to rank because the Broncos felt like they hit their ceiling last year just with the way they played. It felt like they were winning every one-score game, and I think part of that is due to Sean Payton and the veteran presence that he brings, coaching in this league for a long time, knowing how to win football games and to coach to win and to put the stats aside for a second and just say, all right, we need to win this football game. And their quarterback being injured, in my opinion, away from going to a Super Bowl. However, more tape is out on Bo Nix now. His stats didn't always look amazing, and it's going to be hard to duplicate now that Patrick Mahomes is back and healthy what they did last year. And then for me, so I have the Broncos still winning the division just because of Sean Payton, and I think Bo Nix has become underrated from all the heat that he receives. I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback in this league, but some guys treat him like he's there with Tua and Shedeur Sanders and some of the other guys at the bottom, which he's a major step above from those guys. I have the Chargers at 2, the Chiefs at 3, and the Raiders at 4, and I'll get into more of my analysis, but I want to hear your standings first.
Yeah, so you said it. The Broncos are intriguing because they won almost every, one possession game last season. And it's funny because the Chiefs and Broncos just completely flip-flopped each other. Season before, the Chiefs were winning, it seemed like every single game, and everyone was like, how are they doing this? It's the devil's magic. They didn't deserve any of their wins, but they were just winning all of those one possession and last second play games to where last season they had a horrendous record in those one possession games, and the Broncos had an outstanding one. So I do think that that's going to flip-flop once again because if I'm a betting man, for as long as Patrick Mahomes is wearing number 15 and he's in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform and he's playing in the NFL, I'm never going to not going to place all of my chips on this Kansas City Chiefs team just because they do have that guy wearing number 15. Kind of the same way I saw with Tom Brady. I mean, Mahomes is only halfway through his career. He has a similar outlook to where Brady was at this point. I mean, however, Brady did take 10 years in between some of his Super Bowls. I don't know if that's going to last for Patrick Mahomes because for him, it seems like he's always in a win-now position. And for this Broncos team, you said it, Bo Nix, I don't look at him very highly. However, I also don't see him as one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, like you were saying some guys do. I think the addition of Jalen Waddle is huge. I think that burst of speed on the outside is going to be massive for this team. Cortland Sutton is just does all the intangibles. He's just such a great receiver in this league. And then the Chargers I have at third, and they really don't belong in third, but someone has to be in third if I'm going to put the Chiefs up at 1, because this team was a team that had the 10th ranked offense in the league with the single worst pass defense team, O-line in the entire NFL, and their defense ranked number 2 behind Jim Harbaugh. But I just see them as an excuse-led team. It seems like as Justin Herbert's been in the league, they've always been led by excuses, and I'm not sure I'm going to see that changing. And they're in such a stacked division, while be it outside the Las Vegas Raiders, that I had to throw someone in third place, and unfortunately, that's where they're going to fall.
Yeah, for me, my reasoning as to I kind of already talked about why I have the Broncos at first. This defense is so good. I mean, this is an amazing defense. You talked about pairing now Sutton with Waddle. I think those are two great receivers because they play a different type of game. They're not the same guy, and I think it just adds to the dimensions of this offense. I have the Chargers at second, and the biggest addition I think of the offseason from anyone really in the NFL was the addition of Mike McDaniel, offensive coordinator. I think this guy was just built to be an offensive coordinator and to call plays. You know, we saw him as a head coach. He's just not a locker room guy. He doesn't have that presence that guys like Dan Campbell, D'Amico Ryans, like we've talked about, have. But the dude can coach football, and there's no doubt about that. And he's got all the talent in the world with Justin Herbert as to who he can work with. Yeah, they don't have the greatest weapons, but he's got enough, and he's going to have a healthy O line again. He has Amari and Hampton in the backfield. He What we saw with the Dolphins, I think, is going to be similar in terms of just the creativity, getting new guys involved, getting different ways to get them the ball. It was a very, very vanilla offense the last couple seasons, and I feel like Harbaugh had something to do to that. And I think he's going to delegate a lot of the play calling to McDaniel, and I think that's what is going to separate this team is people have always told me the Chargers are good. I never want to watch the Chargers because I just felt like all their games were so boring to watch. Even when they were winning, it's because they had more talent, but they didn't really prove it. They kind of just willed their way to wins, and I think Harbaugh had something to do with that. But now they have that it factor, I think, with McDaniel. And to me, the Chiefs, I'm not going to say they're in danger of missing the playoffs. And like you said, it's stupid to ever bet against Patrick Mahomes, just like it was to ever bet against Tom Brady. This isn't me betting against Mahomes. This is me looking around and saying we could be starting to see the downfall, not of Patrick Mahomes, but of this rendition of the Chiefs. I don't think Andy Reid's going to coach forever. I think Patrick Mahomes will stay in Kansas City and have a second run like Brady did. But at some point, I feel like this first run is kind of coming to an end. And listen, Travis Kelce's not giving them anything. You know, he'll still rack up okay stats and grab a few touchdowns, but watching him run routes is kind of getting painful. And for a wide receiver corp that's led by Rashee Rice, who spends more time on the injured list, it feels like, than he does on the field, I just don't think Mahomes, coming off a torn ACL, is going to be able to scramble and run as much and will this team to as many wins. Do I think they're still going to be good and make the playoffs? Yes, probably. However, I wouldn't be shocked if they took a step back. And listen, this wasn't a team that was 10-0 and setting the NFL on fire before Mahomes got hurt. This is a team who was most likely going to miss the playoffs before he got hurt, and then he tears his ACL, and it's like, oh, well, then that's the nail in the coffin. But still, they were struggling last year in the regular season, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of that. However, I can't ever bet against Mahomes, so I'm not picking them to finish in third with a whole lot of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand your point there. However, I would like to say we've seen Mahomes do a lot more with a lot less. I mean, he won a Super Bowl with Marquez Valdez-Scantling being his number one wideout. Obviously, like you mentioned, Travis Kelce's production was much higher than what it is right now. However, I think a wide receiver locker room of Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and this new guy of Cyrus Allen, the rookie they picked up, from what I've heard, he's been a standout receiver in their training camp so far. So maybe he can take a big step. I'm not saying he's going to be the number one. Obviously, Rashee Rice has to come in and be that guy. But if they can all take a small step forward, I mean, we've seen Mahomes do it with much, much less. And I want to give a second to comment on this Las Vegas Raiders team. I don't think either of us see them doing or making anything, some sort of a splash next season. However, I would like to give any Raiders fans out there a slimmer, or I guess a beacon of hope for their future. This team's youth is incredible. I mean, Fernando Mendoza just picked number one, obviously. Brock Bowers is already one of the best tight ends in the league. And then they have a star running back at Ashton Genty. So they have a ton of young talent moving forward. So maybe it's not your time right now, but wait 5 to 10 seasons. And I know that's a long time to wait, but maybe that's when the Las Vegas Raiders make their run because they haven't been good for a very long time.
Yeah, I agree with you. This was a Raiders team that I think were kind of like the Giants in ways that people were like, man, maybe they might take a step and kind of be sneaky good. And then the noise came out where Tom Brady announced that he wants Kirk Cousins starting the season at quarterback. And I do think that could be helpful. And just being in such a tough division, I think people kind of realize that there's still some time away. But yeah, I agree with you. Amazing big three in those three. I love Clint Kubiak as a head coach as well. I think he's the right guy. I mean, Pete Carroll just was not the modern NFL coach that the Raiders needed to take that next step. Um, the wide receiver core does worry me a little bit with Trey Tucker being the wide receiver one on this team. It's definitely their biggest weakness. But they have Max Crosby and guys on defense who are up and coming. I do think this is going to be a really good team in a few years once Mendoza finds his footing in the NFL. But it's hard to have your coming out party in a division like this.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be stepping on as a rookie for this Raiders team who's facing the seventh hardest schedule in the entire league. And listen, that's not an excuse. Every team in this division it has a hard schedule, and that's because of the fact that they're in such a great division. However, that's not exactly, I guess, the standards that you want Fernando Mendoza stepping out on the field on. So I don't think we're going to see. I do think we'll see him this season. And I think that's just due to the position that Kirk Cousins has been thrown into. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I still think he can play. However, with such a hard schedule, they're bound to lose games, and then frustration will grow where the fans will be calling and asking for their number one overall pick to step on the field. And that's when he'll get his time to shine, kind of when there's nothing else to play for except his career. But wait a few years, and maybe this Raiders team can make a splash. However, I think we're about ready to move on to what I would deem as the number one division in the entire NFL. I think as long as we omit the Arizona Cardinals from this division, who are just absolutely horrendous, they don't belong in this division at all. These top three teams are absolutely unbeatable. It seems like, however, like we said, a couple of these teams are going to have to get beat. So I'd love to hear your standings for this division.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to deem them the best division in the NFL. And I think when I get to my standings, you'll understand why. So, winning the division, I have the Los Angeles Rams. Listen, don't try to get too fancy here. Don't try to be that one guy who's like, "Oh, I had this team." Like, no, the Rams. It's chalky, but it's the right pick. The Seahawks, who I think are gonna slide back a little bit, still finish in second. Then I have the 49ers at third. I have the 49ers injured reserve team finishing fourth in this division. And I have the Arizona Cardinals coming in fifth. And I'd love to hear your rankings before I explain more.
I mean, that is such a good line with that 49ers team. We do see they did come out stating the fact that all of these injuries aren't because of where their stadium is located. It's due to how they run their practices. I don't know if that's something they want to be flexing about. I don't know if that's a good or bad news because I guess you can change your practices, but you can also change where your stadium is. So I don't really know what to make of that. I do think Kyle Shanahan is one of the best coaches in the year. He was in the running for coach of the year last year, and he can make an abysmal team look like they're in the running for this division. But yeah, you said it their best. I mean, for their cons, it's all of their injury woes. I just don't know if they're going to be able to beat that. I haven't been able to see George Kittle finish the season in what seems like forever. Even though when he's out there, he is one of the best all-around tight ends in the league. I mean, he blocks, he catches, he runs routes, he does everything. Ricky Pearsall is going to enter this league out again. And then Mike Evans, he's been injured back and forth within the last couple of seasons, which is why his 1,000-yard seasons came to an end. And I just don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. And I'm just not sure that Brock Purdy's ready to kind of carry that much of weight to carry this team to a top spot in the division. I think Brock Purdy's the type of guy where he looks a lot better than he is when you surround him with such amazing talent like he has had on this team when they are healthy. Because when healthy, this is one of the best teams in the league. Don't forget that. I promise you that, especially with a guy as explosive as CMC. But I think I'd have to agree with you. I do think that this San Francisco reserve team, with how good they're going to be because of all the injuries, would put up a good fight versus Cardinals team being led by Mike LaFleur. So, but getting up to the top of the division, I do have the Rams and then following in suit the Seahawks. It's almost disrespectful to put the reigning champs as number 2 for the division, but you could argue it'd be even more disrespectful to put this Rams team as number 2 instead of the Seahawks because of what they're coming into this season with. They just had the reigning MVP in Matthew Stafford. Sure, he's getting up in there in age, but we don't see any dip in his play. He's just won the MVP. And obviously there are some arguments made for Drake May, but I really don't think it was a hard discussion at all to hand him the trophy. And I'm a New England guy. And then they have so many weapons on this front. It's unbelievable. They have a good offensive line. They have Puka, Devontae Adams. You could call them one of the best 1 and 2 punches in the league. I think the only reason they're probably not the best is because I'd give it to those boys in Dallas. And then after them, I think they're following them up. And then on the defensive end, they were already good. And then you go and trade for a guy like Myles Garrett. I was a huge fan of Jared Verse, but obviously Garrett outdoes him. And now you hear the rumblings of Aaron Donald coming back, who, in my opinion, if we're just talking primes, is the best defensive player of all time in this league. So this team is going to be incredibly scary, and I just don't know if the Seahawks are going to be able to outdo them.
Yeah, I'll go bottom up here as to my rankings. We are in complete agreement in this division. First of all, the Carson Beck hype, we need to chill out with that a little bit. I mean,
Hey, you went crazy though.
this is a guy who's
Crazy though.
a 5 year college quarterback. The moment was never going to be too big for him. This was listen, the Panthers were not preparing for Carson Beck and the Cardinals for this game. They were trying to work on their own stuff, and they had, what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of training camp before this game. I mean, that was probably the biggest position of success that Carson Beck is ever going to be put into in terms of his NFL career. And yeah, he played well, but it was against a bunch of backups, playing with a bunch of backups, and I'm not buying the Carson Beck hype. I think Jacoby Brissett is going to be the quarterback for this team. It just felt like Carson Beck kind of nailed the moment, and proved that he can be a backup maybe in this league, but he's not a starting quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. But that's enough talk about the Cardinals, who, I mean, listen, the only reason I'm going to be watching Cardinals games is because I'm a diehard Notre Dame fan, and that dude, Jeremiah Love, is electric. However, he doesn't have much to run behind, so I wouldn't be shocked if his stats don't show how good he is. Coming in third place, I mean, the assisted living 49ers are really starting to get up there in age, and I think that has part of the reason why all these injuries are piling up. You look at guys like Kittle and Evans, and can you expect them to be healthy for a 17-game NFL season? I personally don't think so. And that's where the flaws in Brock Purdy really come out. No one's questioning, if you surround Brock Purdy with the right weapons, that he can be a good enough NFL quarterback to put you over the top and to bring you to and win a Super Bowl. However, when those guys are missing, that's when he is missing, where I don't think he can lead second strings like we've seen guys like. I mean, that's what makes you a good quarterback, is when your guys go out, you can still carry the team to wins, and you can prove to do it yourself, and I just don't think he's there yet. I agree with you. I think Kyle Shanahan may be the best coach in the NFL with the way he's able to scheme stuff up. I mean, we saw him do it with countless quarterbacks. I think he's the biggest reason for Purdy's success. But this defense, well, it's good. I think it's a lot of big name guys who are just getting up there in age, who are not going to be as good, and we're going to slowly, they're on the decline in their career. Their stats aren't going to get better every year. They're going to start to get worse. And for the Seahawks, they lost a couple defensive pieces. Sam Darnold had a career year. Is he able to back that up? We saw it in Minnesota and then last year. So that's 2 straight years where he has balled out. So I don't think we can just point to Darnold and be like, man, that was an anomaly. He's due for regression. But I do think, the Seahawks are now going to be the hunted instead of the hunters like they kind of were last year. And I don't know if Sam Darnold's completely ready for that, but you can't doubt the man at all. He just led his team to a Super Bowl. I do think the loss of Kenneth Walker is going to hurt them a little bit. But listen, the JSN, in my opinion, the second best receiver that we have in this league, I think he's going to just back up what he did last year and maybe have an even better year. And that's why I think the Seahawks would probably win any other division in this league. I just think the Rams on paper are arguably one of the greatest teams of all time that we've ever seen. I mean, this Rams team is absolutely loaded, and they have a coach in Sean McVay who has proven himself. He's already won a Super Bowl. They have a veteran quarterback. They have a really good young receiver in Nakua, who is, top 5, top 10 at least in the league. They have a veteran receiver. They have Myles Garrett, the best defensive end in the game. If they bring back Donald, which I feel like he's been practicing at the Rams facility for 4 months now, you might as well just sign with them. a veteran defensive tackle. I mean, this is a loaded team, and there's a reason that they are heavy favorites to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. The Rams, they're in a precarious spot just because it seems like if they don't win the Super Bowl, they were a bust, which is almost ridiculous to say and ridiculous to hear come out of my mouth. But I think that's just the truth. I think, like you said, because of how stacked they look on paper, there's no reason they shouldn't come out here with a Super Bowl, bearing any crazy injuries happening to multiple players on their team. Unless Matthew Stafford is the one going down, I think it's going to take multiple injuries happening to this Rams team to not make them the number one threat to that Super Bowl run. And then it just pains me. I know we keep harping on it, but with the 49ers, they're such a good team. I always want to bet on them, but you just can't. It seems like there's just a confluence of things that have to come together for this team to stay healthy, and it never does. And then Seahawks, everyone's disrespecting them kind of just by law because of how good this Rams team is going to be, but we're going to see if they can back up what they did last year, winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, one quick word before we wrap it up. I think the NFL is more like the NHL in the fact that it's hard to win it all, even being the best team and having the best roster. I think you look at leagues like the MLB and the NBA, those are leagues where having the best roster, I think, is a bigger advantage and leads to, and is a direct correlation to more success. I mean, you look at the days of those Warriors dynasty, and now you look at the forming dynasty we have with the Los Angeles Dodgers, where they just had so much more talent than everybody else, where okay, yeah, you could point to the Blue Jays taking the Dodgers to 7 games, but the Dodgers ultimately still won. And the Warriors in those days, I mean, no one was even sniffing them out once KD joined them. Where you look at leagues like the NHL and specifically the NFL, the best team doesn't win it every year. And we saw that maybe even last year with the Rams, with how good they were, where, yeah, this is a really good Rams team, and no doubt in my mind are they the best team and the best talented, and they have the most talent pool in the NFL. But I would not be surprised, and I don't think they should be as big of favorites as they are, just because it is so hard to win a Super Bowl. And it's not a best of seven series. It's a 1 game NFL playoff. A couple lucky bounces. You know, your kicker misses a few kicks. Anything can happen. And it's so like even when Tom Brady was at the peak of his powers, Mahomes at the peak of his powers, their teams don't win it every year. And so I am a little surprised at how much everybody's going all in on the Rams just because of how hard it is to actually do it and win, 3 games in a row, probably in their case, in a playoff setting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the things that causes that is just injuries. The roster you see at the beginning of an NFL season is drastically different from the one you see at the end of it, just due to the fact of how rough and dangerous the sport is. The roster is never going to be the same, and you see that, as you said, in the NHL. They play a 7 game series of brutal, just trying to injure the other team. So when you get to that Stanley Cup championship round, the team you saw in the first round is extremely different from the team you saw in the first round almost every single time. And yeah, the Rams don't chalk it up. It's not just the Rams league where no one else can win it. However, if it was a life or death situation, I think we're both putting our money on Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's hard to pick against them. I mean, here I am saying, oh, you can't chalk it up. But you asked me who my Super Bowl pick is, and it's probably the Rams right now. We will get to that at a later date. We'll have our awards come out, and we'll give our full playoff predictions ahead of the NFL season. But that was our full division standings where we think everybody is going to finish in the 8 divisions. And just doing this kind of just allowed me to realize, like, there's going to be some good teams missing the playoffs, and it feels like there's a lot of parity in the most popular sport in America, and it's just going to continue to help grow it. And I don't know about you, man, but I love baseball, but these dog days of summer are starting to get to me. I need some football in my life.
Could not agree more. I can't wait for this NFL season to start. I think this is going to be one of the best seasons we've had in a long time. And like you said, going through this and team by team, there are going to be some dangerous squads that are going to be waiting from the sidelines and watching from their TVs at home come January.
Yeah, that'll do it for CamelBacked Media. We will see you guys next time.